Storytale Kingdom. Story.
In a cozy little cottage, a pregnant woman gazed out her window, her eyes fixed on the lush, green rampion growing in the forbidden garden next door. It belonged to a witch, and the woman craved it more than anything. Seeing his wife grow weak with longing, her husband knew he had to do something. That night, under the cover of darkness, he crept over the garden wall. As he carefully gathered the leaves, his heart pounded with fear. Suddenly, a figure appeared, blocking his escape. It was the witch. The man froze, the rampion still clutched in his hand. He fell to his knees, begging for mercy. The witch stared down at him, her expression cold and unyielding. She offered a harsh bargain. He could take the rampion, but in return, she would take their unborn child. The man, desperate and defeated, bowed his head in agreement. Soon after, a baby girl was born. Just as promised, the witch arrived to claim her. The parents stood by, helpless and heartbroken, as the witch wrapped the infant in her cloak and carried her away into the deep forest. She named the baby Rapunzel. Years passed, and Rapunzel grew into a beautiful young girl with magnificent, long golden hair. They lived in a small cottage, but the witch's pride in Rapunzel was possessive and controlling. One day, the witch led Rapunzel through the woods, her grip firm on the girl's arm. They arrived at a tall, imposing stone tower with no doors and only a single window at the very top. With surprising strength, the witch lifted Rapunzel and placed her inside. Scared and alone, Rapunzel looked around the bare, circular room, her long hair already trailing across the stone floor. This tower was to be her new home, her prison. Life in the tower was lonely. Each day, when the witch wanted to enter, she would stand at the base and call out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." Rapunzel would then lean out the window, unpin her long, braided hair, and let it fall all the way to the ground. The witch would grab hold of the golden braid and climb up, hand over hand, while Rapunzel held tight to the window frame. Despite her isolation, Rapunzel found small joys. She would weave wildflowers into her hair as sunlight streamed through the window, and she would sing. Her voice was clear and beautiful, and it would drift out of the tower and into the surrounding forest. The birds would often perch on her windowsill, listening peacefully to her melodies. One day, a prince was riding through the forest when he heard the most enchanting song he had ever heard. He followed the sound until he came upon the mysterious tower. Hidden behind a tree, he gazed up in wonder, listening to the beautiful voice. He returned day after day, captivated. One afternoon, he saw the witch arrive. He crouched low in the bushes and watched as she called for Rapunzel to let down her hair. He observed carefully as the witch climbed the braid and disappeared into the tower. The prince now knew the secret. After the witch had left, he stepped out from his hiding place, his heart filled with a mix of excitement and nervousness. He stood at the base of the tower, took a deep breath, and called out gently, imitating the witch's voice, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." From her window high above, Rapunzel heard the call. Cautiously, she lowered her braid, curious to see a stranger waiting below. The prince gripped the golden rope of hair and began to climb. When he reached the top and stepped into the room, Rapunzel backed away, startled. But the prince greeted her with a warm, respectful smile that eased her fears. He knelt before her, and she sat shyly on her small stool, surprised by his gentle nature. They began to talk, and soon, they felt like old friends. The prince described the world outside, the vast forest she had never explored, the bustling kingdom, and the lively people. For the first time, Rapunzel didn't feel so alone. Before he left, they held hands and promised to meet again. As he climbed back down her braid, Rapunzel's heart soared with a hope she had never known. Their secret meetings continued. The prince visited every evening after the witch had gone, and Rapunzel's lonely world was filled with laughter and joy. One day, the prince gave her a small ribbon as a token of his affection. Rapunzel treasured it, keeping it with her at all times. But their happiness was not to last. One evening, as the witch climbed into the tower, Rapunzel, in a moment of innocent forgetfulness, said, "You are so much heavier to pull up than the prince." The witch's face contorted with rage. She had been deceived. Spotting the ribbon Rapunzel tried to hide, she knew the truth. In a furious outburst, she grabbed a pair of scissors. Rapunzel knelt on the floor, motionless and terrified. With a swift, cruel snip, the the witch cut off Rapunzel's magnificent hair. She held the severed braid triumphantly as Rapunzel cried on the cold stone floor. The witch then dragged Rapunzel out of the tower and banished her to a desolate, barren land to fend for herself. Alone and heartbroken, Rapunzel wandered through the dry, lonely landscape, clutching her shorn hair. Meanwhile, the witch returned to the tower, the golden braid in her hand, and waited. That evening, the prince arrived and called out his usual greeting. The witch, mimicking Rapunzel, lowered the severed braid. The prince, suspecting nothing, began to climb, eager to see his love. But when he pulled himself through the window, he was met not by Rapunzel's gentle smile, but by the witch's gloating, cruel face. "You came for your songbird," she sneered, "but the cat has got her, and she will sing no more." Shocked and horrified, the prince backed away. In his desperation to escape, he stumbled and fell from the high window, tumbling down into the thorny bushes below. The thorns didn't kill him, but they blinded him. The prince survived the fall, but his world was now darkness. Injured and blind, he wandered aimlessly through the forest, calling Rapunzel's name, surviving on roots and berries. For years, he searched, never losing hope that he would find her again. In the desolate land where she was banished, Rapunzel had given birth to twins, a boy and a girl. She lived in a simple hut, raising her children alone, her heart aching for the prince she thought she had lost forever. She would often sit outside, singing the sad songs they once shared, her voice carrying across the empty plains. One day, the prince, wandering closer than ever before, heard a faint, familiar melody. It was her voice. Hope surged through him, and he followed the sound, calling her name. Hearing his voice, Rapunzel stood up, her heart pounding. She saw a figure stumbling towards her and ran to meet him, her twins in her arms. They met in an open field. She knelt before him, and as he reached out blindly, her tears of joy fell upon his eyes. A miracle happened. As her tears touched him, his sight was restored. He blinked, and the first thing he saw was the face of his beloved Rapunzel and the two beautiful children she held. They embraced, their long separation finally over. The prince, his heart overflowing with joy, led his family out of the desolate land and toward his kingdom. They walked through forests and fields, their journey home a happy one. When they arrived at the palace gates, the guards recognized their long-lost prince and welcomed them with cheers. The prince presented Rapunzel and their children to his parents, the king and queen. They welcomed her with open arms, overjoyed to see their son safe and to meet his new family. Rapunzel, once a lonely girl in a tower, was now a princess, surrounded by love. They lived together in the castle, their days filled with peace and happiness. Rapunzel would stand on a palace balcony with the prince and their twins, no longer trapped, but free. They would walk hand in hand through the lush castle gardens, watching their children play, their future bright and full of promise. The kingdom celebrated their return, and under a sky filled with lanterns the family stood together, finally whole, finally home, ready to live happily ever after. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more classic stories.